Hello friends, welcome back. Today we would be learning a very important thing, that is how to automate data entry in Google Forms. To achieve this, we would be using Google Spreadsheet. We would be writing a macro in the Google Spreadsheet which would automatically populate the data which is there in the spreadsheet to the Google form. So for example, this is a form, like I have created this test form and it has these fields: first name, last name, age, occupation and country. And if you see in my spreadsheet, I have these columns and I have some sample data with me. What I'll do is when I'll click this button, this data which is being seen over here would be transferred into the Google form, and if you'd see, this is the actual response of the Google form. Now here there are no responses, but when I'll click this button, the code in the macro would get executed and you would be able to see the responses over here. So let's go ahead and click this button over here. I'm clicking it right now. You could see it is running some script. On the top it is showing, and now here it is showing the message finished script. And now if I view my form, you could see there are 5 responses. So as you saw, within few seconds the data which was there in this Google spreadsheet got transferred onto the Google Forms. You could see there are 5 responses. You could see the first name, like there are 5 first names, and if you just scroll down, you would be able to see the rest of the fields: last name, age, occupation, and finally country. In this tutorial, I would be showing you how to write a macro which would be doing this task of automatically entering the data from the Google spreadsheet to the Google form. To start, what we'll do is we'll take a brand new worksheet, as we'll be learning it from scratch. So we would take a new Google spreadsheet. I'll select this blank spreadsheet over here. I will give it some name. So this is the name which I have given, and this is the data. So what we'll try to do is we'll write a macro which would be transferring this data from this sheet to the test form, which is over here. So to write the macros in the Google spreadsheet, go to Tools. Here you'll find something called Script Editor. Select that option and a new window would open. It will take few seconds to load, and this is the place where you would be writing the code to read the data from this spreadsheet and then submit it into the form. So this is function my function. This name is of your choice. You could rename it as per your convenience. So since we are doing automated data entry, I am giving the name as auto data entry. You could give any name of your choice, and here you have the beginning curly brace and end of the curly brace, and within these 2 curly braces would be coming the code which would be actually doing the task of automating your data entry. The first step in this macro would be you should know the URL where you have to enter the data. Like this is the test form and this is the URL, but keep in mind the URL which you would be providing over here in the macro would not be this URL. We need the form URL, and you would be able to find the form URL from the source of this page. To view the form URL, what you have to do, select anywhere on the page. For example, this field, do a right click, click on inspect. I am using the Chrome browser. This is the steps which you should follow on the Chrome browser, but this is also true for the Firefox and the Internet Explorer browsers also, but I would prefer if you use the Chrome browser. And once you do that, you would see this HTML would open it, and if you just scroll above, somewhere you would find this tag called form, and it has this attribute action, and after action it has some value. This is the value which we need to provide in our macro. So just double click on it and copy it. because we would be using this URL in our macro. So I have copied it and now I would be using it in the macro. So what I'll do is I'll create a variable. The syntax is var is a keyword. Now we need the variable name. I'm giving the variable name as form URL. You could give any name of your choice, is equal to double inverted quotes, and just paste the URL which you copied from the HTML source of the form and ending with semicolon. Here the syntax is different from Excel VBA. This is Google script, not VBA script. Okay, so this was the first step to identify the form URL and use it in the macro. So this is the variable form URL which is storing this URL. In the next step, we need to retrieve the data from this sheet, the sheet 1 of this workbook. So we will need two variables, one for the workbook and one for the worksheet, like this. I'll explain you these two lines. At line number 6, which I am highlighting, where workbook, now this is the reference to the workbook in which we are writing this script. Since this script is part of this data entry workbook, this variable workbook is referring to this entire spreadsheet. And now this spreadsheet may have multiple sheets. Right now we have only one sheet 1 over here, but if I click on this plus symbol over here, then multiple sheets can get added. So within this workbook we have the data in sheet 1. So if you would see at line number 7, we are using the workbook object and we are making a reference to sheet 1. The syntax is workbook.getSheetByName and then sheet 1. And the line number 6, when we had created the workbook object, the syntax is spreadsheetapp.getActiveSpreadsheet. So with the help of these two lines, we are making it clear that we are reading the data from sheet 1 of this workbook. So up till now we have created 3 variables. First one was of the form URL, next one was the workbook, then the worksheet. Please take care of the syntaxes. You could see each statement is ending with a semicolon. If you make a syntax error, the script would not work. Please take care of the syntaxes. Now what we have to do is we have to use this worksheet object and access these values which are present over here in sheet 1. So for that, the syntax would be like this: worksheet dot get range. Here we have to specify from which cell we are reading the data. So if you would see in our worksheet, we need to fetch the data of A2, B2, C2, D2 and E2. So for example, first name is stored in A2. So here you would mention within double inverted quotes A2 dot get value. So this statement would return the value Brad. So what I'll do is I'll create a variable var fname is equal to. So when this line would get executed, fname would store Brad. I'll end the statement with a semicolon, don't forget that. Similarly, I'll have to create variables for last name, age, occupation and country. So let's quickly do that. I'll just copy this and then change the variable names. This is for last name, one more. So what I'll do is I will use this variable as lname, and this I would be fetching from B2. Next would be age, that I would be fetching from C2. Here I would change the variable name to age. Next is occupation, then country. So this is for occupation. that would be coming from D2, finally country, and that would be coming from E2. So these variables are ready. When these lines would get executed, each of these variables would store their respective values. At this point, we have captured the values of the variables from the data sheet. Now, if we see this form, the value of first name, which we would be fetching from here through our code, should be populated in this field. Similarly, last name should be populated in this field, and so on and so forth for the rest of the fields. So we will need to create a mapping between these HTML elements and the values. So we will have to know the HTML properties of all these text fields. To know that, what we have to do is select this text field, do a right click, select inspect, and now if you would see, this text field of first name is highlighted in blue over here, and here are some properties. If you'd see, the name of this text box is this one, entry dot some numbers. So using this name, we would be creating a mapping with the first name, which we would be fetching from the data sheet through the code. Syntactically, the mapping would look something like this. For that, I'll copy this name attribute. So I'll just copy this and I'll use my notepad to show how the mapping would look like. So this is the HTML name property, and its value should be the variable name which we are fetching from the data sheet, and the variable name is fname, so we'll use this fname. And what we'll do is, like, we'll just put the HTML property in double inverted quotes like this. So we have created a mapping of fname with this HTML text, which represents the first name on our test form. Similarly, we'll have to create mappings for rest of the fields. I had already fetched the HTML names, so I'll just place it over here. So this one is for the last name, this one is for age, this one is for occupation, and the last one for the country. So syntactically, you should place commas after each sentence, but since country is the last one, there is no entry after country, so there is no comma over here. Now y'all must be wondering, why did I pick up the name attribute from the HTML? So once again, I go to the HTML, and here I had picked up name. Now our intent is to uniquely identify these text fields. So you could use any of the HTML properties as long as you are uniquely able to identify the text field. Since all these elements have unique names, I picked up the name property. So our mapping with the HTML names is ready. So what I'll do is, I'll just copy this and paste it in our code. I'll show you the syntax. I paste this. Now this entire thing from line number 16 to line number 20, what I'll do is, I'll enclose these lines in curly braces. So this entire data map, I will store it in a variable where I'm giving the name as data map. This is any variable name of your choice. In my case, where data map is equal to this entire statement. Do not forget the semicolon at the end, else it would throw errors. So now your data map is ready, and if you now read the code, you'll understand that the fname value which we are fetching from the data sheet is mapped to this HTML text field. So when the code will get executed, the f name will get placed here. Similarly, last name would get placed here, and the same applies to the rest of the fields. So when the code will get executed at this point, we won't be able to see, but internally all the fields would have been populated. So the next thing would be this click of the submit button. So we would not actually be submitting by clicking this submit button, but in fact we would be writing few lines of code which would be simulating this action. So the lines of code go like this. It is a standard code. I'll show you. I create another variable called options, and now I set these values. Now the method is post and payload is data map. So payload is something, a concept of JavaScript. I will not explain what is payload, but whenever you remember one thing, whenever you want to submit this kind of data onto the form, you would require payload. So this would remain always constant. So these lines of code from 22 to 25 will always remain the same. So here the method is post, and this payload is the variable name of your data map. So our variable name was data map, so I just placed it over here. And don't forget these opening curly brace and closing curly brace, and finally the semicolon. And now just one line of code is left, and that is URL fetch app dot fetch, and now you see it requires two parameters, the URL and the parents. So your parameters are these options. So this options variable, I am just copying it and placing it over here, and the first parameter is the URL. So if you remember, in the first step we had this form URL where we had saved the URL. So I'm just copying this variable and putting it as the first parameter, and finally the semicolon. So this is the entire code which would pick up the values from this data sheet and insert the same into this test form. So if we see earlier there were 5 responses. What I'll do is I am deleting all the responses. So all the responses are deleted, and here there are no responses at this point in time. So what I'll do, I'll go back to the code. I will save it doing Ctrl S. So I have saved it, and now if I run this code, what is expected is this row number 2, the data should be there in the form. So let's go ahead and execute it. To execute it, go to run function, and the name of the function, in our case it is auto data entry. I click here, and now the execution will start. So now the execution has completed. It was pretty quick. And now let's see the Google form. And now you have one response over here, and now if you just see the response, you could see the first name is Brad, last name is Lee, age is 27, occupation is athlete, country is Canada. And if you check, this was the data which was there on the Google sheet. So we have successfully written the code to automate data entry in the Google Forms. Now if you want to place a button and execute the code through the button, what you have to do is go to insert. Here you will find something called drawing. Select that option. Within drawing, you'll have this option of shape. Click on it, and here you will find different shapes. So you could select any shape of your choice which looks like a button. So I'm selecting this option, just left clicking it anywhere on the screen, so this kind of an object would appear. If you want to edit the text, right click it, you'll get the option of edit text, and here I am writing click. You could just resize it, and then click on save and close. And now you observe this button has appeared on this spreadsheet. You could just move this button anywhere, and now you want to assign the code which we had written on the click of this button. So here we have the function name as auto data entry. What you have to do is, if you right click on the button, then you'll get these 3 dots. Click on those 3 dots, then you'll get the option assign script. Select that option, and here you have to provide the name of the function. So in our case it was auto data entry, and now click OK. So now the expectation is when you click on this click button, the code over here should get executed. So let's click this. You could see the script is running. In fact, it has finished within a blink of an eye. And if you would see the Google Forms, here the responses has changed to 2. And if you'd see the individual responses, there would be the same response because the same entry was made. Again, here we did not change anything. We just submitted by using the click button. So we should have 2 entries with the same data. Here you could see the first name, last name, age, occupation. This was the first entry. If you would go to the second entry, again you find the same thing. Brad Lee, age is 27. It is showing as 27.0 because of formatting. That is okay. Occupation and country. So we have achieved this. We have successfully automated the Google form. So this automation was for 1 row of entry over here. What if you have multiple rows of entry, and that would be an actual scenario? For that, you will have to place a loop. The loop will begin at line number 8, and line number 27 would be the last line of the loop. So all the lines from line number 9 to line number 27 would get executed for the number of times the loop would be iterated. So it would be a for loop. I would like you all to try it by yourself. Please try to write a for loop and get the execution done for the number of iterations you desire. If you find any difficulties, feel free to let me know, and I would be more than happy to help. So this was how we automate data entry in Google Forms. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Guys, if you like my tutorials, I request you to please subscribe to my channel so that you would be updated with the latest videos I would be uploading. Guys, thanks for joining. I would see you in my next tutorial. Goodbye.